we're Neurodiversity in Law, and we're here to support aspiring solicitors, barristers, or anyone who wants to enter the legal profession. So today I'll introduce our panelists. James Kitching, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, hi there. So I'm James. I'm a corporate solicitor at One More Bond Dickinson. I'm just coming up to 4 years qualified. I also sit on the Junior Lawyers Division Executive Committee, and I'm a Law Society Council member for those that are 0 to 5 years qualified. But I'll talk more in a bit.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Ayo?
Hi there, I'm Io, and I'm a future training solicitor at DAC Beechcroft. I start in September, my training contract, and I'm currently studying the LPC at the moment.
Thank you. Chris?
So hi, I'm a third seat trainee, soon to be, well, on Monday I'm going into my fourth seat at Macfarlane. So I've been doing this for about 18 months now, and yeah, have a bit of experience, which hopefully.
Thank you. And Sachin, finally.
Hi everyone, Sachin. I'm a second seat trainee at Cloud & Co. And I'm currently, I work a lot with aspiring solicitors and help with their sort of disabled or disability outreach schemes.
Thank you. So we have some questions we've got in advance of this event, and we thought we'd ask to go through first intro exercises, written exercises, case studies and presentations, and finally group discussions and activities. If you would like to ask a question anonymously, message Neurodiversity in Law privately, and then I can ask the questions. So to start us with, James, what are law firms generally looking for at assessment centres?
Sure. So the first thing I want to say is that if you get to the assessment centre point, then give yourself a pat on the back, because it's incredibly competitive and incredibly hard. And actually, the most difficult step is that first step in getting to an assessment day. So never sort of put yourself down or feel that you haven't done incredibly well to reach that point. This year, so I'm fortunate. I've been through the stresses and the strains of getting onto an assessment centre, but I've also helped run them myself and run them for my current firm and my previous firm. And I think this year our applications are up 75% on last year in terms of people applying for law firms. So it's getting more competitive, which isn't what you want to hear. But seeing as today we're talking about assessment centres, once you get there, do sort of, on paper, they've seen something that they like, and what they're doing when you come along to an assessment centre is to find out who you are as a person. And I think one of the key things is to be authentic, to be you. Don't try and be anybody else. Don't try and sort of live up to what you think the firm wants from you. At the end of the day, what we're looking for when we're assessing people on the assessment centre is to find out that there's somebody there that we can sit next to in an office, somebody that we can work with, and somebody who's honest and genuine. What we don't want is people pretending to be somebody who they're not, and it's very easy to spot those people. So the key is being yourself, being who you are, and being open and honest about that, because that is, as I say, what people are looking for. And so generally when you're coming through the door, it's always hard, no matter what stage you are in your career or life, you're always nervous, you're always anxious about an interview and being judged and assessed. But the key is that over time and with experience, you will get better at it, you will get used to it, and the more people you talk to and the more people you hear from will give you that sort of knowledge and experience. So when you arrive sort of in an assessment centre, what we're looking for, as I say, is people to be themselves. And the other thing is that be aware that everyone, and this is a really horrible thing to say, that everyone is judging you, from the receptionist when you arrive, to the trainee that might show you around, to the paralegal. Everyone will be asked for their input at some point. So always treat everyone with the utmost respect, as you would expect to be treated in the same way. But at the same point, don't overly worry yourself or get sort of worked up. Just be yourself. I mentor a number of people, and it's always one of those things that I find the hardest to say to people is, be yourself, don't stress, don't worry. But it is, we're all human. We're all looking to work with each other and be human. And so it's just recognizing that the people on the other end of the table aren't trying to catch you out. They're not trying to lay a trap for you and trick you. They're just trying to find out who you are, and get to know you and say, yeah, that's the person that I want to work with. So hopefully that's kind of a good intro to what firms are looking from a general perspective.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's good. It's good to know. Good to have the overview. So let's get into it, into intro exercises. Ayo, could you tell me a little bit more about them and what you did to prepare for them?
Sure. So I've actually never done an intro exercise before myself. I've done a little practice one. I've never done one in an actual assessment centre. But I mean, from my understanding, it's when you get kind of a series of different kinds of like exercises that you have to do. So you might have to write a letter. You might have kind of like another business simulation exercise you have to do within a certain amount of time, if that's correct. I mean, I've never done one myself. I'm not, I might not be the best person to ask about this question, but I think one piece of advice I'd give is just to structure your time and manage your time efficiently when you're doing these exercises. For example, if you're having to, let's say you've got a letter that's been written by a client, you're asked to spot kind of punctuation and grammar errors, really focus on that attention to detail, because as a lawyer, obviously that's a very important skill. I'm trying to think what else. Sorry, I haven't actually done intro exercise, so
I can jump in if you want. If you want, I can help out there. I've judged quite a few, so it's. I think one of the key things is remember that not everyone has studied law when they're going into these assessment days. You know, some people have done. I did politics and history. I did a GDL. When I was first doing assessment centres, I had no idea of anything to do with law, or I had no idea what a contract was, what the basis of it was. I came into very much blind. And when firms are assessing things in intro exercises, they appreciate that. They understand that not everyone has a knowledge of law. And so one of the key things I think is recognizing that they're not trying to test your knowledge of law. They're not trying to catch you out and say, does this person know what stamp duty land tax is? Do they know what a stock transfer form is? They will tend to give you all the information you need. And it's, as I said, it's the attention to detail, and also it's getting across it. Where some people fail is that they don't look at what they're being asked. So for example, it may say, we need you to write a letter to a client, and they'll write it as if they're writing to a partner, and so they might do it in bullet points, or they'll write it really formally. To give an example, one of my previous ones we used to do was, somebody has died, you need to write to the beneficiary to tell them that they've earned something under a will. I think 75% of people fail to recognize that somebody had actually died. When we're asking people to write that letter, we're saying, have a bit of human touch there. Where's your compassion? Where's your consideration? How would you write to somebody? So when you're sort of looking at these exercises, really think about, who's my audience? Who am I addressing this to? Who am I directing it to? Is it a partner in the firm who just wants a list of bullet points because they're going to take it into a meeting? Or am I writing to a client? Really have a think about what's the target audience, and think about the kind of tone of language that should be going to that person. And then, as I says, make sure you check it, make sure you write it in a way that is clear and concise, but also recognize that, as I say, you don't know everything. You're not expected to know everything. What they're looking for is the stuff that is in your control, because you learn law on the job, you learn a lot of the skills on the job. So it's more about your personality again coming through. That's the important bit.
Thank you for chipping in on that. That's really helpful. So moving on to written exercises. Chris, do you mind telling me a bit more about what those are and what you did to prepare for them, if you had any?
Yeah, so I've done a few over the years, and essentially they can vary. As James was saying, it can be sort of a bit letter-like sometimes. Other times it can be a bit more comprehension-y. So I remember the one for my firm was twofold at the time. It was reading an advert for a holiday that some person had been on, and then reading the complaint that they had then written as a result, and what the differences were between the advert and what they actually received. And essentially we had to write a persuasive letter, which would again, as James mentioned, be targeted at the right sort of tone and to the right people, and also hit most of the points that of difference between the two things. And then also write a bit or consider a bit about the outcome, what the possible sorts of solutions were from the point of view of the people who would receive this letter. So it's really important to make sure you've structured your time effectively, so that you're not selling yourself short, particularly if it's a multi-element written exercise and that you have got a couple of things to write or a couple of things to read. and really carefully consider what's on the page. And you know, most of the material, if not all of it, is already there. And again, to echo James, they're not testing people who have not got a background in law about their knowledge of the law. So I was a geography graduate when I was doing all of these things. Again, I did a GDL and LPC, and so I knew very, very little. And so they weren't picking me up on the individual components of the law that I got a bit wrong, with the details about misrepresentation or anything like that. So yeah, and I think on the subject of sort of neurodiversity specifically, it's really key to make sure that you've talked to the firm about reasonable adjustments that you may require in that time. So I was very upfront during all of my applications about all of this, and I talked to the graduate recruitment departments of the firms that I did assessment centres at in advance to discuss my needs and to discuss what I would find helpful. And so for my written exercises, say talk about my experience at Macfarlane's in particular, I was given the use of a computer and extra time, 25% extra time. These were both things that were identified on my disability report that I'd had given to me at university, sort of to diagnose me with dyslexia. And so really, you know, carefully consider and whether you need these adjustments. I would really recommend, you know, to put your best foot forward. Make sure that those adjustments are in place for you, because it can make a huge difference between having, you know, in my case, too little time or enough time to do all the necessary reading, and again to make sure that my my writing wasn't impacted by the spelling issues or the structural issues or the handwriting issues that I experienced as a result of my condition. So yeah.
Thank you for being so open about the reasonable adjustments. Did you feel comfortable disclosing your reasonable that you needed reasonable adjustments?
So I was very nervous when I was first applying. I was wary of being, you know, sidelined or somehow shuffled out in the process. And the more I thought about it, the more I came to the conclusion that, first of all, I need to put my, as I said, my best foot forward, and I need these adjustments in order to enable me to do that. But secondly, part of this process of applying to law firms or chambers or wherever you are hoping to apply in the end is choosing a place that's right for you. And it's as much a selection on your part as it is on the firm's part. And what I didn't want to do is end up at a firm which, you know, didn't accept me for you know, who I was and give me the adjustments I would need to sort of succeed when I was there. So I felt it was really important to be really open and honest, just to, you know, see if the firm accepted me and accepted the adjustments that I needed, and to see how willing, how you know, happy they were to cater for me, and how enthusiastic they were about this. And you know, some firms were better than others, and I found that very, very informative in terms of where I wanted to end up. So yeah, I think the process can be, and my firm was really easy. Just email graduate recruitment. Often you can put it in the actual written application. Sometimes that may get just siphoned off into sort of the data collection arm, the sort of anonymous element of the application, where they're just trying to sort of see what the makeup of the people applying to the firm is. So often it's not actually captured by GradRec when they're looking at the applications themselves, because it's sort of siphoned off into a different section. So sometimes you will need to read the invitation to the assessment centre carefully, and normally they'll have as a line, please email X or Y person at the firm to discuss any adjustments that you need. And so you need to take it upon yourself a lot of the time to do that. But yeah, I don't think I met a single firm who weren't at least willing to have the conversation, and you know, the vast majority were brilliant at putting different things in place. And yeah, I found that a really useful way of ensuring that I felt confident going into the assessment centre, that I had all the needs I had or I needed, and also that the firm was the right fit for me.
Thank you. That's really reassuring, especially to our listeners who worry that their neurodivergence might face the stigma by recruiters, but that's really good to hear. So Sachin, I'd like to ask you a bit about case studies. Could you tell me what they are and how you prepared for them?
So case studies are essentially designed to sort of, you know, give the candidate a often sort of fictitious scenario, sort of round about what they'd expect working at a commercial law firm. So that can be anywhere from a merger and acquisition to a litigation, or whatever actually the firm focuses on, or their specific practice areas. I think the key with case studies is initially the firms are going to give you a lot of information, and the key with these exercises is just prioritization. That you need to be able to pick out the key pieces of information that they've given you, and actually you then use that and not get lost in the sort of quote unquote waffle that they give, because they're essentially testing you on what kind of information can you pick out and what's key and what's relevant to your scenario. As both James and Chris have mentioned, they're not testing any sort of law. I did an environmental science degree, so very very similar to Chris. So what they want to I think more often they're just going to be testing your sort of commercial skills. So do you understand, like do you understand different aspects of business? So often times it might be sort of a due diligence, for example. So for example, I've done one where we're given a case study on a merger and acquisition, and the firm asks you, okay, what kind of due diligence would you do during this M&A? And that's essentially asking you to consider, okay, well, what actually needs to happen during a merger and acquisition. So, and what departments will be engaged. So corporate, finance, what kind of due diligence you need to do. So, okay, litigation risks on the target company. So it's more just testing your sort of commercial awareness, and then that's something that I think you can pick up quite easily on. But as Chris mentioned, I think reasonable adjustments are important for this task in particular, because notably there's going to be quite a strict time pressure. So I know I had 50 minutes per hour, so that was that really helped me sort of allow for that extra time for some reading to do. So yeah, I think with case studies, don't go in trying to preempt what they're doing. Go in with a highlighter pen and just an understanding of read the question 2 times, 3 times, understand what they're trying to do, and then just pick out the key pieces of information. And I think when you have to present this information, structure is really going to be key. So they're not going to want you to write War and Peace. They're going to want you to present your information in a really logical and coherent way. So that means using things like subheadings, using things like bullet points, because ultimately they know that you're not going to have the understanding of a fourth C trainee or a qualified solicitor. So the better you can present your information in a coherent way, the better they'll have an understanding of your entire thought process. And in the end, it'll make it easier for you to actually condense the quite heavy pieces of information there. So key things there are prioritization and structure for case study exercises.
Thank you. I guess it's also useful to point that you can take highlighters or notepads and a pen to just make notes and have them in front of you to refer to. I don't think you'd be disadvantaged if you do take them. I meant. So we've received quite a few questions on group activities. So to begin with, could I ask James, please, what are the various group activities do you get in the assessment centre, and how would you?
They're really varied, to be honest. It's one of those things that I think firms really take different approaches on. I've done group activities before where you've got a giant map and you've got to try and get yourself from one location to another and convince other people in the group to go via your route, and you get points for what route you go. I've done group exercises where you're negotiating a new contract between Simon Cowell and ITV. It really, really varies. But the key thing that sort of is across all of them is it's a chance to see how people interact with others, and that's what the firms are looking for in the group exercises, to see how you are with somebody else. Are you somebody who takes the lead, who sits back? who provides the good input now and again. And I think the key thing there to recognize is that firms aren't necessarily looking for one particular kind of person. I know, especially at my firm at Wombles, we're looking for all kinds of personalities. We don't just want one cookie cutter fit, because there's so many different roles, so many different departments, and each one requires a different sort of speciality and skill. And so if you are an introvert or an extrovert or anything in between, there is a place for you. We're looking for a whole, a menagerie of people. And so when you go in, again, it goes back to sort of what I said at the start. It's about going into those exercises and being yourself. If you're somebody who sort of, you've got to make sure you say something. Obviously, you can't just sit there the whole time and be quiet. You've got to have a bit of confidence. You've got to put yourself forward. But don't feel like you have to be a leader. Don't feel like you have to tell everyone what to do and keep everything in order. It's better to be that person who, says one thing, but that one thing is something that everybody jumps on and changes the whole course of the discussion, than to be the person who says 100 things and they all sort of get shrugged off by the rest of the group. So, take your time to think about what you're going to say. Make sure it's something that's valuable and useful. And the other thing is, like, keep an eye on the other people around you. Don't see them as your competition. See them as your sort of future colleagues. Help each other out. If there's somebody who's trying to say something, they haven't had a chance to speak, give them that opportunity, hand them the mic, because that will go down well. We'll notice that as judges around the room, the person that's been compassionate, the person that's helped others, as much as the person who is able to lead. And I think something that Chris really said well is that it is about you finding the firm that fits for you. When I got my training contract, I did a whole bunch of different vacation schemes and assessment centers, and I went to one and James, you're too loud. I went to another, James, you're too quiet. James, you lead. James, you don't lead. And I never felt I was any different across them. But when I finally got the training contract that I got, I felt comfortable. I felt that, this is the firm I want to be at. I fit in here. This seems right to me. And you'll find that, when you're doing the different assessment centers, especially the kind of group activities, you'll kind of say, yeah, this is me. This is where I fit in, and you'll kind of relax to it. And that's the key when you go to any of these. Remember that you are judging the firm as well, that you are trying to find a place that you fit. And in these kind of group exercises, think that these people around me are the people I may be working with one day. So I've got to see them as sort of that, and not sort of as competition.
Can I chip in there if that's all right? I was just going to say that I'm someone who's quite introverted, and I used to struggle a lot when it came to group exercises. And after a few assessment centers where the feedback I got was that the interview was quite good, the written exercise was quite good, but you just didn't contribute enough to the group exercise. So I thought, okay, how can I try and make myself more confident? I think kind of chipping in quite early in the exercise can help, because it can be quite easy when people are kind of talking away, and you become more hesitant because you might not have contributed as much. So if you can get in as much as you can at the beginning, then I think it can just make you a little bit more confident. So you can kind of say to yourself, oh yeah, I can actually do this. I actually understand kind of what's going on. Because often I think introverts can be stereotyped as being not confident, when introvert doesn't necessarily mean you're not confident. It just means that you're a bit more reserved, take a step back, and that's fine. As it's been said, all firms looking for different types of candidates. You can't just have people who are fully extroverts. You've got to have a whole kind of range of people. So if you are an introvert, don't let that kind of take over you in a group exercise. Know that you've got to the place you're at because you're good enough ultimately. So just kind of put your strengths into that exercise. If there's a particular point that you've thought of, say it in some detail. You don't have to necessarily talk every minute of the exercise. That's not the point. It's just about kind of the quality of what you put as opposed to the quantity. So yeah.
That's really helpful, Ayo. And to jump off that, could I ask you, how would you deal with someone who, say, shuts your ideas down or other people's ideas down in a group activity?
I try not to focus too much on other people, because ultimately the assessor will hopefully know that people who are shutting down other people's ideas, it's not the best characteristic to have. So I kind of just focus on putting my ideas forward. I still remember with my vacation scheme assessment center with the AC Beechcroft, I made a point where kind of no one said anything, and I felt a bit oh, did I say something completely wrong? But I ended up, getting the vacation scheme in the end. So maybe it was a good point. I don't know 100%, but I think you just have to kind of put yourself out there and just say what you have to say. Give it a go. You've got nothing to lose really. You've got to that stage because you ultimately are good enough. So anyone else, shutting it down, or, anyone else not acknowledging it enough, that's not necessarily a reflection on you and that your point isn't good enough. It could be that the discussion takes just a different kind of route, but that doesn't mean your point didn't have value in the first place. So I just say be yourself and just give it a go. Say what you want to say. And you can't really control how other people are going to react to your points either. So yeah.
Sorry, can I just add one more thing, Hannah?
Go for it.
I think with group exercise as well, language is quite important. So if you show that you're being inclusive, I think that's also good. So for example, if someone makes a point that isn't particularly relevant, or you don't think that is particularly relevant, okay, or if someone say makes a point but you're not getting in your point, say okay, Io makes a good point, but I think it will be good if we do this. So the fact that you're say okay, well you've acknowledged the point that Io or James or Chris have made, but then you're presenting your point, at least shows that you're thinking in a more inclusive way. Because at these assessment centers, you're going to find all sorts of characteristics, all sorts of personalities. I think the polite way to put it would be you find some very strong-willed people. So the way to deal with that is to not as everyone said, not to be sort of overshadowed by them, but more so try to get your point across, try to be inclusive, and if there's someone this typically happened on my group exercise assessment center, that we had someone who was very, very sort of outspoken and very loud and wanted his point heard, no matter what. And someone then said, well, this other girl was trying to speak and she couldn't even get a word in. And then someone said, oh, sorry, can you let X speak? So it's stuff like that's really going to score you brownie points if because ultimately they're just testing the interpersonal skills there. So if you see someone being sort of overshadowed, then just say stop and just say, okay, can we hear from this person? Because ultimately it's just down to being inclusive.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So, in regards to things that you've learned from other candidates, could I ask Chris, what's something that you liked from what you saw from other candidates that you used for yourself, I guess, in future assessment centres?
So I've learned a couple of things actually. I remember going into one and we had various bits of paper in front of us, and I have a terrible habit of forgetting pens and papers and all sorts. And it means that what you can't do, which is very important for me, is scribble all over the page, circle things, underline things, highlight things. And the girl, next to me just, it was my first assessment centre. I was a bit worried, whatever. And the girl next to me just stuck her hand up and said, can I have a highlighter? And of course, Gradrack went and got one. I was like, oh, well, can I have one too? So, if you forget anything, do ask for it. That was quite useful. Another thing in a group exercise, to echo what sort of Sachin is just saying, that I went into my first group exercise and there was two different personalities in sort of the groups. And one was a very overbearing person who, was trying to talk at a million miles an hour and was always sort of interrupting people right at the end of what they were saying so that no one else could sort of butt in and make their own point. And there was another person who was much more calm and considered and was sort of saying a point and then going, well, what do you guys think? So if Io had been quiet, going, I think this, and Io, what do you think about that? Or do you think that's a good idea? And then going, I remember trying to take a step back and going, I think as an assessor, that would be a brilliant thing to see, that collaboration, that ability to bring people in, that those sort of social skills that are, trying not to be overbearing and trying to show that you're just a nice person who is willing to listen to others. So yeah, you can actually learn quite a lot from other people at assessment centres. And I think the key thing to remember is that the first one may well not go well. And you need to take these things as learning experiences. They're really hard to get onto, but once you're there, be prepared to be knocked out at that stage, if you like, and to do it all again, but accumulate this sort of bank of knowledge and experiences where next time you walk into an interest assessment, you're not going to be surprised that there's 3 or 4 emails that you need to read, or next time you go into a group exercise, you're not going to be sort of the person who struggled to say something in the first 10 minutes and therefore didn't say anything at the end, you know. Yeah, use them all as valuable learning experiences.
Thank you. We were getting questions on if someone, how does someone, how is someone a bit, if someone's a bit overbearing, how do they be a bit more proactive to not be it? So that was really useful that you mentioned it. Can I ask James, please, what's something that you wish you were told before you went to, before your assessment centres experiences?
I guess the point I think I said before, I wish I'd known that when you're basically when you're invited to an assessment centre, you basically have got the job. So that seems like a bold statement to me, but what I'm saying is that every single one of you in an assessment centre probably could have that role. You're all good enough. And I think when I was going to them at the start, I thought, oh, you know, I'm competing against everybody else here. I've got to prove myself to be the best. And really, the application process is the hardest bit you'll go through. Getting your application filtered through the thousands of others that do it is actually the hardest bit. If you get past that stage, you've got your foot pretty much through the door. It's just about turning up and showing them who you are and showing that actually you match the person that you painted on the piece of paper. And when I've done the other side of it all, when I've been the sort of assessor, that's what we've been looking out for. We've got these 20 great application forms or however many, and we're like, right, these people are great. All of them could work for us. Let's see what they're like in person. And this person turns up and they're nothing like they were on the application form. And that can go one of two ways. It can go in completely the wrong direction. We're like, oh, we thought this person was really, you know, interesting, exciting, etc. And they just seem to have made up a lot of stuff that's on here. Or it goes the other way and we're like, oh, actually, we took a risk on this person and they're even better than we thought. And I think that's the thing is and I don't lack in confidence. I'm somebody who did acting from a young age, and I think that really helped me, just being sort of thrown in front of people and had to make do. But it is what's just been said before by Sachin and Chris, and it's about it takes time to get that confidence about doing it over and over again, and it's about not being afraid of failure. You know, I think I'd say fortunate. I was crap at many things in life, whether it be sport or art or whatever, but it meant that I learned quite early on that the world didn't end when I failed. And I think it's a good lesson to learn in life. And it means that when you go to these assessment centres, you just go and think, you know what, they obviously see something good in me. You know, they've picked me out of the crowd, and all I have to do is show them that I'm worthwhile. It's not about going in there and competing with people. It's not about going in there and showing, you know, you're 100 times million better than anybody else. It's just about showing them who you are. And I think if I had that confidence right at the start of my process, I think I would have got a training contract a lot earlier than I did. But it comes in time, and that confidence comes in time. And it's just, you know, put yourself out there in any way you can to start with. Forget setting aside assessment centers, setting aside, you know, applying. You know, do things that you wouldn't otherwise do. Get involved with societies at university, get involved with charities, join clubs, put yourself out there and do stuff that sort of unnerves you, because that will set you up and give you the confidence that you need when you eventually go and do the assessment centers, and that will really help you out in sort of making you ready for anything. So yeah, I guess that's the kind of the overarching thing I'd say is that yeah, I wish I'd known that they were just looking for me to be me, and I think that would have been so helpful.
Thank you. That's really reassuring to hear. Can I ask Chris, please, about your life as a trainee, and if you have any reasonable adjustments made there? And also, I know you do some things with Enable. Could you tell me more about what that is and what you do?
Sure. Well, I'll tackle the Enable one first, if I may. So Enable is a network that's run by the inclusion team in Macfarlane's. That we have various staff networks, of which this is one. And it's essentially, it's for people who identify as having neurodivergent conditions or disabilities of some kind, both, you know, physical and otherwise. And essentially, it has three main aims. So the first one is to sort of develop a community of people within the firm who know each other and, you know, can support each other and understand each other and build that sympathetic ear and that comfort of being in a group. The second one is to try and educate the wider firm. We put on events and things. We put on talks to talk about neurodiversity or something like that, or we give, you know, we've had drinks events and parties, that kind of thing, just to try and raise awareness for the fact that, you know, these people are here, and just if for example, you go to a party run by one of the networks, you go, oh, okay, that's the sort of, you know, that's what Chris say is thinking about. That's what's important to Chris in the firm, and then maybe I should talk to him about this kind of thing. And the third thing is to try and improve the firm, trying to make it better, use the ideas and the barriers that we've experienced as during application process or during the working life to inform the firm's policy going forward. So yeah, it's a thing that I joined right at the start of my time at McFarland's. I've just joined the steering group for it as well, so I'll be hoping to sort of push these initiatives forward a bit more. But yeah, so talking about life as a trainee with dyslexia in my case, you know, it can be quite hard sometimes, but equally it can be great. So you just need to be aware of the fact that you may find certain tasks harder, but you know, that's all right, and that people, you know, will help, people will be sympathetic, people will understand, and actually people really want to understand. I've never had a colleague sort of dismiss me as a result of saying I'm dyslexic, and much more of the time it's much more of a case of oh, okay, so what can I do to help? How can I be better? What can I change to facilitate your working, you know, enable you to thrive and to help the team? And a big part of that is as I was saying, disability adjustments. So when I joined the firm, there wasn't really a formal process for doing this. We were instigating it now as a result of, you know, a few trainees coming forward, which is brilliant. And we've got a formal process now of having disability needs assessments right at the start of your time at the firm. They are crucial. I think they're, you know, they're brilliant. They are in the case of McFarland's, I'm sure it's the same for the other firms represented by the other people on this panel, times when an external assessor will come in and they will talk to you about your symptoms, your needs, the things you struggle with, the things that you do well, and they will provide a list of recommendations to you about how you can work, but also to the firm about things the firm can do for you. And a few of the things that the firm's put in place for me have been really, really helpful. So the first thing that I have is disability coaching. I have coaching whenever I want it. At the moment, I'm having a sort of a couple of seat with a woman called Kate who works for a firm called Adjust, and these are people who specialize in helping people with neurodivergent conditions. And I found that really useful to talk about things I'm struggling with and to discuss ways of changing my workflows and habits that I have to try and make myself, you know, more efficient and to, you know, help me as a trainee. The next thing I think, which is probably more important on a day-to-day basis, is the fact that I have assistive software. So I have two pieces of software. I have Dragon Naturally Speaking, which is dictation software. This helps because often I know what I want to say and I can describe what I want to say, but I can't necessarily write it very effectively. So it really helps me to be able just to write a letter by speaking. So that's brilliant. And the other thing I have is called Read and Write. I didn't know this existed before I joined the firm, before I had my needs assessment, but essentially it's twofold. It first of all reads things out to me on the page, so it can read websites, PDFs, Word documents, whatever you like it to read, it can do. And the other thing is it has a phonetic spell check. So often when I'm spelling something in Word, I right click and the suggestion for, you know, the erroneous spelling that I have to correct it is inaccurate. It doesn't have what I want to say. And that's because Word is coming at this from the point of view of, you know how to spell what you're trying to write, but you've hit the wrong letter. So they suggest words with similar letters. A phonetic spell check approaches it from a different way in that it goes, okay, rather than similar letters, what words have similar sounds to what this person has written? And quite often that's quite different from what letters are close on the keyboard to the letters that you actually hit. So I find that phenomenally useful. I also had things like at the start of the pandemic, I asked HR, you know, I was like, look, I need to print things out. I need to, you know, how do we do this? And they gave me a bit more money to buy a printer and buy a shredder to sort of help me, and gave me sort of allowances for printers, paper and ink. I can do things like I can record conversations I have with associates, so that, you know, my poor writing ability when I'm writing in my notebook means that I miss lots of information that's given to me. And so the ability to listen back to it later on is invaluable, particularly because I have a really poor short-term memory. So I've forgotten the conversation by the time I've got back to my desk, and I open my notebook and I find half the information isn't there. So being able to have a recording is fantastic. There's training for my supervisor. They get a software package at the beginning of my seat, which goes, this is dyslexia. This is what it means. This is what this person will struggle with. This is what they're sort of better at as a result of having the neurodivergent condition. And fundamentally what it tries to do is foster a conversation, because obviously everyone's experience is different, everyone's symptoms are different, and you need a much more tailored solution than just sort of a general slideshow about this is what dyslexia is. So it fosters that conversation with your supervisor. And the last thing I probably should mention is that I have certain things like, which I think would be helpful for a variety of neurodivergent conditions, things like Chris needs to sit in this location in the office rather than this location. So for example, if we have two-person, when we're in the office, we have two-person offices with glass walls, and we have secretaries sitting in the sort of communal shared spaces in between all the offices. This is really distracting for me because I see people walking around, I hear conversations on the phone. I find it really difficult to focus. So by saying, oh, Chris needs to be in one of the offices in the quieter corner of the department away from the secretaries, means that I can actually focus on my work. So they take, account of me when they're doing floor plans and things. So that's a significant number of adjustments the firm's put in place as a result of a disability needs assessment. And I'm sure that, most firms would be more than happy to consider anything that was reasonable. A lot of the things I have hadn't been given to other trainees before. A lot of the software was quite new. So IT did struggle initially to get some of the software to work, because it was, playing, not nicely with our firewalls and things like that. But they have tried really hard, and yeah, it's been invaluable. It's been brilliant.
Thank you. That was really insightful. I really appreciated that. Sachin, what was your experiences from what Chris is jumping off what Chris has just told us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I have anything to add. I think you pretty much said everything. I mean, I think well, absolutely from the start, honesty really is key, because if you think about it, if you're not honest, they're not mind readers. So if you're not honest, they're not going to be able to help you. They're not going to be able to help you. So yeah, I think it's really important to just communicate, exactly what you need. And this isn't just off the back. Spend some time thinking about what you need. Don't just judge it from Chris's mind experience or Chris's experience. It's all very much specific to the individual person. So if you've had something at university that's helped you, a specific software, but you know that the firm may have this type of software, well then ask them, because obviously you're going to be more familiar with that software that you use at university. So it's all about essentially making your life easier when you actually start at the firm. So saying that again, repeating what Chris said. I mean, people are going to be, no one's going to blacklist you from anything, particularly from like work or anything like that. But equally, no one's going to sort of get out a hypothetical violin for you either. At the same time, it's as much your responsibility to be able to implement like whatever mitigation strategies that you have, just as much as it for the employer to make the reasonable adjustments. So essentially, it's a two-way street there. So and equally, you wouldn't want to have excuses for everything, but this is where sort of time and preparation come into play, and through trial and error, and through working, especially when you're working in law, there's so many sort of different documents and that you have to read, and for example, if printing will help, where for example you can use highlighters, you can underline, you circle key pieces of information, then by all means ask the firm, because they'll be willing to accommodate that. So yeah, I think the only piece of advice I can give is just take the time to really figure out what you actually need, and just have that honest conversation with grad rep as well.
Thank you. That's I appreciate that. We've got a question, and I thought I'll open this out to the floor. Whoever feels happy to talk about it. How would you deal in an interview with a conversation about low academic grades because of your late diagnosis of a neurodivergent condition?
Yeah, happy to jump in there. it's everything we've said about before. It's about honesty. I mean, and it goes back. There's two steps to this. Firstly, it's the grades in your application forms. It's how do you assess that? And I tell my mentees, be honest. If you've had a poor first year or second year, and then you manage to get some means of facilitating the way you took exams and the way you learned that made you get better, or you've got more interest, or whatever the reason is, there's a whole host of things that affect us in our lives. It may be personal tragedies, it could be disabilities, whatever it is. There are lots of things that mean that we don't perform our best. And then if you can then show and you can explain that to them and show to people, well, actually, that's not who I am. They will understand that and they will read that and they will listen to that. If you put an application form when you put a load of poor grades down and you put no explanation there, all they're going to do and look at it is go, well, I've not been told anything. All I can assume is you're not very good. And then they put the application away. You've got to give people a reason to give you a chance. And being honest about that is the best way to do it. So the first step is the application form. And there's always boxes that say, is there anything more you'd like to tell us? And I think that's one of the most important boxes on the application form. It's the chance for you to really tell who you are and get something out there that's different from everything else on the application form, that stands aside from someone else. So always put down, and as long as it's a good enough reason, if you are honest with yourself and you look back and think, well, actually, I just didn't work hard enough. Well, okay, you've got to take that. But if there are factors there, especially when it comes to disabilities, then be honest about them, be open about them, because then someone can say, yes, okay, I get that. Especially when you're going through school. I mean, my grades were all over the place at times in my life. And it's about recognizing what's me and what's something else that's going on. When it comes to the actual assessment days, your grades have been ticked. If you've been accepted for an assessment day, it means they think your grades are good enough. They've got over that issue, so don't worry about it. They may ask you about whatever you wrote down, or they may ask you to talk about it, but they wouldn't have invited you along if they didn't think you were good enough. They would have just got rid of you. So it's about recognizing, okay, I've done that part of the exercise. Now I'm trying to sort of prove who I am. And it's one of the things I say to all the sort of people who apply to my firm, or and is trying to apply, is everybody's meant to have a degree. That's the tick box. Everyone has to have a law degree, everyone has to learn the GDL, tick tick tick. It's everything else that you've done and everything else that you bring to the table that we care about. That stuff's really unimportant. What else have you done in your life? Have you gone out and, as I said before, joined societies, had a job, paralegal, whatever it is? That's the stuff we care about, we're interested in. So with the grades, yes, law does require good academics. It requires to show that you're intelligent, but there's many ways to show that you're intelligent, and not just through grades. So make sure that you can actually explain that and get that across to people, because no one else will write that for you if you don't put it down yourself.
Thank you. That's really nice to hear, actually. So to bring it back to today's topic of discussion, assessment centres, what's your most memorable experience you had? I'll start with Ayo, but I'll ask all of the panelists today.
Sorry, I was muted. That is a really good question. So there was one assessment centre I did back in January last year. This was just before the pandemic, actually. And I just got in my head like so much. I think it was the second proper assessment centre I went to. And yeah, I mean, I remember getting the train into London and like kind of trying to like get myself in the zone, but I just got myself like kind of like so worked up. And I got into the assessment center, met everyone, like, did the little bit of small talk. I think my imposter syndrome just kind of set in like instantly. And that's not something I regret, but something I look back on and I kind of think that I should have had like kind of more faith in my ability and more kind of, more confidence in that sense, because I'd got into the kind of the assessment center stage. And I think at that time, because I was so anxious and like kind of so nervous, it got to the group exercise, which was the first thing. And I just remember not being completely with it because I was so focused on trying to make a good impression that I kind of got myself so anxious. And yeah, the group exercise came and I didn't perform kind of in the way I wanted to. I didn't like contribute in the way I wanted to. It was a negotiation exercise. I didn't expect it to be a negotiation exercise because I'd spoken to other people before who've done assessment centers and the exercise was different. Another thing that I regret kind of, trying to going in with like a mindset that's going to go a certain way rather than trying to prepare for kind of like everything. And yeah, that group exercise was honestly horrendous. I remember having like a sinking feeling just thinking like, why am I here? Like, but the interview and the written exercise went okay. But I kind of left the assessment center knowing the group exercise hadn't gone well. I kind of knew that, you know, I probably wasn't gonna get that vacation scheme. But I think that was probably like the best experience I had looking back at it, because it kind of was like a bit of a wake up call. Like, you know, there's no point putting all this work into an application, you know, doing like video interviews, psychometric tests and things like that, and getting to the last stage and kind of letting your confidence be, letting yourself kind of get in your head and get like ridiculously anxious because, you know, you're scared of what other people think, or you're scared of being judged, or you're scared that you're not good enough, because ultimately like you kind of are good enough at that stage. So yeah, that would probably be like kind of my most memorable assessment center, because it was the worst assessment center. But I think, you know, as was said at the start, like, you know, don't fear like failure, because ultimately you've got to have like, you're going to have, maybe not to the extent that I did, that was honestly a horrendous day, but you know, you're going to have times where you're not going to be as good as you kind of hope to be in that particular kind of instance, but that doesn't mean you're not a good candidate. It's just a kind of a question of like time, a little bit of luck as well, and ultimately finding the right firm for you. Like looking back at it, obviously I didn't perform to the best of my ability, but I actually felt quite uncomfortable. Even my interview, I didn't feel like it was kind of the right like place for me. So, you know, looking back at it, it might have been a bit of a combination of it just not being, you know, the right firm for me at the time. And I think I haven't started my training contract yet, but I think I found like, you know, a firm which like kind of suits my like values, and kind of I really like the firm. So yeah, I think ultimately, I think use any kind of experience that you have is like valuable, and it teaches you a certain lesson. Even a good experience, you know, let's say you have a really good assessment center and you don't, you know, get the vacation scheme, or you don't get the training contract. That doesn't mean that you didn't perform well. There are so many positives to take from that, and also like take the negatives, like, you know, work on it, like critically evaluate why you haven't kind of done as well as you kind of wanted to. Yeah, so I went a bit of a tangent, but yeah, that's kind of, I think,
great.
Yeah, I think taking like everything you can, like soaking up everything you can from like any experience, I think is important, because it means you can perform better at the next stage. So
Thank you. That's actually really useful to know, because it firstly is a sign that if you're not comfortable with an assessment center, and also you're checking them out as well as them checking you out. It's a two-way street.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do any of our other panelists would like to share their memorable experiences? Sachin?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna fire this one away. So yeah, this is actually my first ever assessment center in my final year of university, because I went to university in Plymouth, so it's a 3.5-hour journey from London. I remember the assessment center being neatly placed right in the middle of my 2 final exams. So I remember doing my first exam, getting on a 3.5 train back to London, arriving into London at around 10:30, and then waking up the next day around 5 a.m. to, you know, go to the office, go to the, you know, the firm's offices, to, you know, start for. I had to obviously do the commute into London, and then, you know, get to the assessment centre for about 9 o'clock. So yeah, I think that. I think I was, you know, I think it might be a bit harsh to say I was doomed from the start, but it was a really like rough morning. So what I'd recommend is that, you know, it's going to be a really, really long day. You know, it's very rare that you're going to be, you know, experienced, you know, to being on your guard, you know, 24/7, you know, from pretty much 9 to, you know, 3, 4, 5, whenever the assessment center ends. So I think the first tip is to, you know, is to make sure that you know, have a really good night's sleep the day before. You know, have a really sort of, you know, good hearty breakfast in the morning to like set you up for the day. But I remember, yeah, getting to the assessment center and, you know, sort of being a bit disorientated, didn't really know what's going on. Went in to do the written exercise, and yeah, it was all just a bit of a nightmare. Well, in fact, I actually thought it went quite well, but little did I know that when I got to the feedback, there were a real load of spelling mistakes, you know, comma splices, any sort of, you know, grammatical blunder out there. So yeah, this is why it's just so important, because you're not going to be used to being tested in that way. before. So it's really important to wake up feeling refreshed. Double, triple check your work. I mean, this comes down to the written exercises and case studies. As I said, you're not going to be used to that kind of pressure before. So, double and triple check your work, even though you think it may be, you're finished. Factor in that time when you're doing the exercises that say, okay, I'm going to have at least 3 to 4 minutes of, at least 3 to 4 minutes of actually proofreading my work, because that's exactly because a lot of law firms operate a strike policy. One sort of spelling mistake. Okay, that's strike one. You misplace a word, and well, that's strike two. So it's really, really important to maintain that level of detail. And then I also remember, coming back to Io's point as well, I remember, bumping into all sorts of people. There was one guy who had a PhD in structured finance who was also going for the training contract. And I remember me with my sort of piddly, I hadn't even finished my degree yet. So you can only imagine the levels of confusion that I was feeling. But it's really important to maintain the attitude that you're all there on your own merits. This is the thing. You can't go into this profession comparing yourself to other people, because it will just eat you alive. Like, everyone is there on their own merits. You all bring something to the table. So it doesn't matter where you went to university or what degree you have or what background you come from. And this comes back to the point that all three of the guys have said. Like, be your own person. Doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. Just focus on yourself. So don't be overcome by anyone. Be friendly with everyone, and just ensure that you get just ensure that you start the day off well, and sort of double, triple check your work as well.
Thank you. That was it made me laugh that you were doomed from the start and thought it went well. But I mean, that's probably a good attitude to have, so you don't get scared from it. Chris, could you tell me about your most memorable experiences?
So I think it's quite similar to the other guys, really, in that I think my most memorable one was actually the first one I did, in that, not everything went to plan, and I didn't feel like I necessarily gave the best account for myself. But I also learned a couple of tips from others. And I remember going into my second one going, I think I've got a better shot here. I feel a bit more relaxed. I've switched up my routine a bit to make sure I can be focused. I've made sure I'm here ahead of time. I've made sure that I've left loads of time and not stressed on the day. I've got different ways of tackling the group exercise by trying to be collaborative. And I came out of that experience, that assessment. It was the one where for the firm I currently work at, and I thought I did really well, and I was like, that went really well. And the reason for that happening was the pretty miserable experience I had a couple of weeks before, and the learning experiences I gained. So when I came out of that second one, I was like, it was brilliant. I put the things I learned into practice, and I felt like I'd given a good account of myself. So you kind of need the bad experiences, I think, to help you get through them. And I think they are, you learn an awful lot more from the times you don't succeed than the times you do. So just really embrace bad days as well as good ones, because they can really help you in the long term, I think.
Thank you. And for the last couple of minutes, can I ask James, please, what are your final pieces of advice you'd like to give?
Sure, I'm going to answer the last question first, because I feel like I need to give the opposite answer to the others, even though I completely agree that that when the times you fail are the times you learn the most. But actually, for me, the time I remember the best is when I got my training contract, and I'd done all these VAC schemes, I'd done all these assessment days, and when I was on the one, it was the firm Coffin Mew that I was at, where I ended up training. And what really struck me, and I remember it still, is that of all the assessment days, all the VAC schemes I'd done, this was the first one where the managing partner had come and spent time with us. He'd come down, he'd talk to us, he'd had lunch with us, and really engaged with us all. And I remember sort of actually going up to him. It was a bit of a sucky uppy thing to do, but at the end I kind of went up to him and said, look, it was really nice to actually meet you, that you actually care enough about the people that are coming into this firm, and you come to talk to us. And I kind of just wanted to say thanks to him for like giving us that time. But it always sticks with me, because that was like when I was like, yeah, this is the firm I want to be at. If he cares that much about the people coming in, then this is a firm where I want to be. And it it stood out when I'd been at other firms for like 2-week-long back schemes and I hadn't seen a sniff of the managing partner or the chairman or anybody of importance. And you kind of think, well, if you can't give us that time, then clearly we're not that important to you. So for me, that was one bit that I really remember well. In terms of final comments and something to sort of say is that make sure that you come along to events like this, really take the opportunities to hear from other people. You can learn so much from other people's experiences. And it's about hearing how people have done things differently. There's not a cookie cutter way of getting into law. It's not the same path for everyone. It's really diverse and different. And the more people you speak to and the more people you listen to, you'll find that out and realize that there is a way in for you. Spend time reaching out to people on LinkedIn. I've seen a few people have added me already, during this. Do that, add people, connect with us, because we'll post stuff and you'll see things and you'll get far more out of that than you'll get out of, setting up an Instagram account called Law Student at Nottingham or whatever. The recruiters aren't going to look at your Instagram account. They are going to look at your LinkedIn account, definitely, but you'll learn more from actually seeing other people's experience and seeing what they're up to. And I'm never going to reject an application or somebody who tries to connect with me. I'm never going to sort of ignore somebody who sends me a message. So you take that opportunity, reach out to people, speak to people, and listen to what they have to say, because you'll learn so much from it, and it'll really help in terms of getting you in law. And that's the key. If you want to be in law, you will get there. But make sure that it is what you want to do, and just keep trying, because people will help you get to that point because they want to. People are generally caring, and they do want to sort of make that path easier for you. So that's kind of a sort of, I would say.
Thank you. That was a really nice note to end on. But thank you for everybody for attending, and to our panelists who took their time out their evening tonight to spend it with us, to share their advice and experiences. There'll be a recording available later on, and I hope you have a good evening, the rest of the evening.